At the edge of town, hidden behind twisted trees and overgrown vines, stood the abandoned Galloway mansion. For as long as anyone could remember, the house had been the subject of dark rumors. Its windows were shuttered, its roof sagging under the weight of time, and yet despite its state of disrepair, there was something unsettling about the way it loomed over the landscape, as if it were watching, waiting. No one had lived there for decades, not since the Galloway family disappeared without a trace on a stormy night many years ago. Since then, locals swore they could hear strange noises coming from the house after sunset, whispers in the wind, the faint sound of footsteps, and on some nights eerie lights flickering from the upper windows. One October evening, a group of friends, Emma, Jake, and Leo, decided to explore the mansion, drawn by the town's ghostly legends. Armed with only their flashlights and nerves of steel, they pushed through the rusty front gate, its hinges groaning like a warning. The air grew colder as they approached the front door, its wood swollen with years of neglect. Emma hesitated, her heart racing, as she glanced at her friends. "Are we really doing this?" Jake smirked. "Come on, it's just an old house, ghosts aren't real." Leo pushed open the door, and it creaked in protest. The air inside was thick, heavy with the smell of mold and dust. Their flashlights barely cut through the darkness, illuminating the grand staircase that twisted up to the second floor. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet, as though the house itself was aware of their presence. As they moved deeper into the house, the atmosphere grew heavier. Every shadow seemed to shift in the corner of their eyes, and the silence was broken only by the faint dripping of water somewhere deep within the walls. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from upstairs. Emma jumped, clutching Jake's arm. "Did you hear that?" Jake's face paled. "It's probably just the wind," but there was a tremor in his voice now. Leo, ever the curious one, started toward the staircase. "We've come this far, let's check it out." They followed him reluctantly, the stairs creaking with every step. At the top, a long hallway stretched out before them, lined with doorways leading to empty, forgotten rooms. One door stood ajar, a faint light flickering from within. Leo pushed the door open with a trembling hand, revealing what must have once been the master bedroom. The bed was still there, covered in a thick layer of dust. But it wasn't the furniture that held their attention. It was the mirror on the far wall. In its reflection, they could see themselves, but there was something else, a shadow, a figure standing behind them. Emma gasped and spun around, but there was nothing there. The figure was only visible in the mirror, its dark form growing clearer by the second. It was tall, unnaturally thin, and as it leaned closer, they could see its hollow, sunken eyes staring back at them. Jake stumbled back, his flashlight shaking in his hand. We need to leave now." But as they turned to flee, the door slammed shut. With a deafening bang, the temperature in the room plummeted, their breath visible in the icy air. The figure in the mirror moved, stepping closer to the glass, as if trying to break through. Panic surged through them. Emma yanked at the door, but it wouldn't budge. The walls seemed to close in around them, the shadows dancing and twisting as if alive. Desperate, Leo lunged at the window, but the glass didn't break. The figure in the mirror was now inches from the surface, its hand pressed against the glass. A deep guttural growl filled the room as the figure's face twisted into a horrific grin. The three friends sprinted down the staircase, hearts pounding, the echo of whispers still chasing them. They could barely see in the dim light of their flashlights. The house groaning under the weight of unseen forces. Every step felt heavier, as though something clung to their backs, pulling them toward the darkness. As they reached the foyer, a deep, unnatural cold gripped the air. The front door, now just a few feet away, slammed shut before their eyes with a thunderous crack. Emma screamed, and Leo froze. But Jack, always the bravest, rushed forward, determined to get them out. Without warning, the shadows on the walls began to move. At first, it was just a flicker, but then they stretched, forming into twisted figures that slithered across the walls like living darkness. "Get away from the walls," Leo shouted, grabbing Emma's hand and pulling her toward the middle of the room. Jack wasn't so lucky. As he reached for the door, something unseen grabbed him, a force yanked him off his feet, pulling him back into the depths of the mansion. His scream echoed through the halls, but it was abruptly cut off. Emma and Leo could only watch in horror as Jack was dragged into the shadows, his body contorting in ways no human could survive. The last thing they saw was his terrified face, his mouth open in a silent scream, before he was swallowed by the darkness. "Jack!" Emma cried, her voice cracking, but there was no answer, only the thick, suffocating silence that followed. Leo grabbed her arm. "We have to move now." They turned to run, but the house was alive now. Doors slammed shut all around them, windows shattered, and the walls seemed to pulse with the energy of whatever haunted this place. The whispers returned. Louder and more menacing. Emma could feel something brushing against her skin, like cold, invisible fingers. The figures in the shadows were multiplying. Watching them, circling closer with each second, Emma and Leo stumbled through the house, searching desperately for another way out. Blood trickled down Emma's face from a gash she hadn't even felt. And Leo limped, his leg badly injured from a fall down the stairs. Their injuries were getting worse, though they didn't understand how. It was as if the house was feeding on their pain. Suddenly, they burst into a large room. The old dining hall, dusty chandeliers hung overhead, and the long table was still set with rotting plates and glasses. In the middle of the room stood a figure, tall and cloaked in shadow. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its presence radiated malevolence. This was no ordinary ghost. This was the head of the spirits trapped within the house, their ruler, their master. "We need to leave," Emma whispered, backing away, her body trembling, but the figure didn't move. It only watched, as if daring them to try. Leo clutched her hand, blood dripping from his forehead. "There's no way out," he whispered, his voice shaking. "It's taken control of everything. It's too powerful." The figure's mouth opened, but no words came. Instead, the air in the room shifted violently, and a force like a gust of wind threw Emma and Leo to the ground. The shadows surged forward, wrapping around them like cold tendrils. Emma screamed as pain shot through her body. Her bones felt like they were being crushed, her skin burning with invisible cuts. Leo tried to shield her, but the force was too strong. The house was no longer just haunted, it was alive, feeding off their suffering, its power growing with every moment. The whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of voices, and Emma's vision began to blur. She could barely make out the shadowy figure that loomed over them, its eyes glowing with twisted satisfaction. Just as Emma felt the darkness closing in, Leo managed to move, his body broken, but his will storm with a surge of adrenaline. He grabbed a broken piece of wood from the floor and hurled it at the figure. The wood passed through it harmlessly, but the figure recoiled for just a moment. It was enough. With every ounce of strength left, Emma and Leo crawled toward the only door that remained open, the door to the basement. It wasn't an escape, but it was their only chance. They tumbled down the stairs, crashing onto the cold stone floor below. The basement was different. The air was still thick with dread, but it was quieter, as though the spirits hadn't fully claimed it yet. The walls were lined with old, rusted tools and the remnants of the mansion's past. In the center of the room was a large, ancient mirror, its glass cracked, but still reflecting the faint glow of their flashlights. As they lay there, gasping for breath, the voices of the ghosts filled the air once again. But now there was something new in their tone. Triumph. The house had won. They were trapped, just like the Galloways before them, just like everyone who had dared to enter. But the mirror, something about it seemed different. Emma, through her pain, crawled toward it, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the glass. The moment her fingers brushed against it, the mirror pulsed with energy, and for a brief moment, the house seemed to falter. The shadows around them flickered, and the oppressive weight in the air lifted slightly. "It's the key," Leo groaned, dragging himself next to her. This is how they're trapped in the mirrors." Before they could react, the shadowy figure reappeared at the top of the basement stairs. It moved slowly, deliberately, its hollow eyes fixated on them. The house groaned, as though it were preparing to swallow them whole. With one final, desperate act, Emma slammed her fist into the mirror. The glass shattered, sending a ripple of energy through the room. The figure screamed, an inhuman, deafening wail that shook the very foundation of the mansion. The shadows recoiled, and the oppressive force lifted for good. As they lay in the darkness waiting for help, a faint whisper echoed through the basement, barely audible but unmistakable. "You can break the mirrors, but you'll never leave." "Not really." As Emma and Leo lay there, battered and blooded, they could feel the oppressive silence of the house around them. Jack was gone. The power of the spirit seemed broken, but the cost was unbearable. Summoning what little strength they had, Emma and Leo struggled to their feet, desperation fueling their shaky steps toward the exit. The house groaned around them, as though furious at their defiance. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward them, hungry, waiting. Just as they reached the threshold, an icy grip shot out from the darkness. Emma turned, her heart seizing in terror as she saw Leo being dragged backward, his eyes wide with terror. "No," she screamed, her voice tearing through the silence. Leo's hand reached out toward her, fingers trembling, but it was too late. The malevolent force yanked him into the abyss of the house with a sickening thud, his screams echoing through the halls until they were abruptly cut off. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emma collapsed to the ground, her body shaking uncontrollably as sobs racked her chest. "No, no, please," she cried. But there was no answer, only the oppressive stillness of the mansion. And the crushing reality that both Jack and Leo were gone with tears streaming down her face. Emma pushed herself up, adrenaline surging as she stumbled outside into the cold night air. She ran, not daring to look back. Her heart pounding louder than her sobs. The mansion seemed to watch her, its dark presence seeping into her mind. Even as she escaped, she finally collapsed far away, her body trembling with exhaustion and grief. Jack, Leo, both lost to that cursed place, and every day since, Emma lived with the agonizing guilt there. Faces haunted her dreams, their voices echoing in her mind. "I wish we had never gone there," she whispered to herself. Over and over again, "I wish we had never gone there," but it was too late. The house had claimed her souls, and though Emma had escaped its grasp, she would never truly be free. The malevolent force that lurked in that mansion would always be watching, waiting for the next victim foolish enough to step inside.